Horses are successfully managed in a variety of outdoor and indoor environments, ranging from extensive rangeland to relatively intensive housing in yards, pens, or stables. Attentive management is important, regardless of how horses are kept. Section 2 of the Code of Practice for the Care and Handling of Equine encompasses all aspects of facilities and housing for horses. We are going to start with pasture and yard housing. Indoor housing will be covered later in this section. Horses are grazers by nature, and time outdoors is good for them, both physically and mentally. They are highly adaptable to many weather conditions, and keeping them outdoors or giving them frequent outdoor access is strongly encouraged. For horses kept on pasture, the code recommends that you practice good pasture management at all times. This includes pasture rotation, weed control, and appropriate stocking density for the type and amount of pasture you have to avoid overgrazing. Pasture should also be free from equipment, debris, and poisonous plants. The code also requires that the application of fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and farm manure be timed to prevent any health risks to grazing horses or contamination of groundwater. This means that you should not apply them while horses are actively grazing the land or in a manner that would expose the water sources to contamination, such as during rain or too close to the water sources. You must also check with the manufacturer or local technician specialist when a pasture can be safely grazed after application. One of the biggest challenges in some regions of Canada is the management of mud. If horses do not have access to a mud-free site, they can become lame and/or acquire painful skin or hoof conditions. The code requires that horses must, at a minimum, have access to a mud-free, well-drained area in the pasture or yard on which to stand and lie down. Mud can be managed by ensuring that runoff of water is possible from the housing area, that there are higher areas in the pasture that are not likely to experience water buildup and mud, that paddocks or pens are not built in low-lying areas prone to mud, or through the use of straw. Stocking density is critical to the welfare of animals. The risk of injury increases when horses are overcrowded in pastures or yards, or when there is competition for feed and water. This is why the code requires that at a minimum, each horse must have enough space to move easily, walk forward, turn around with ease, and lie down in a normal resting position. The amount of outdoor space horses need depends on many factors, including the size of the horses, the amount of dry space, the amount of grazing available, the feeding program, and if there are any foals at foot. Another factor is hierarchy. Within a herd structure, horses interact with each other within a dominance hierarchy. This means there are horses that will be dominant and horses that will be submissive within the herd. When forming new groups, the introduction of new animals brings a risk of injury to the horses. Aggression can be reduced by increasing the space allowance, either temporarily or permanently, or allowing horses to become familiar with each other by first keeping the new horses in a secure adjacent area. Keep in mind that some horses are more aggressive and may not be suitable for group turnout. There must be sufficient space for subordinate horses to escape aggression, and they must be kept in groups that are managed in a way that minimizes risk. Horses should be segregated into compatible groups, taking into consideration the nutritional needs, age, sex, and size of the horses. Herds should be monitored frequently, especially with newly added horses. And if the horses prove to be incompatible, they will need to be separated. Generally speaking, a minimum space allowance per horse in meters squared is 2 to 2.5 times the height of the horse at the withers squared. If your horse is 2 meters at the withers, the minimum floor space required for that horse would be 4 to 5 meters squared. For an open front shed that houses more than one horse, you should provide 11.1 meters squared each for the first 2 horses and 5.6 meters squared for each additional horse kept in the pasture or paddock. So, 4 horses would require 11.1 meters squared times 2 plus 5.6 meters squared times 2 for a total of 33.4 meters squared. This is just for the shed space. The pasture or paddock space is in addition to this. And remember that along with enough space, sheds should also be built in a manner that allows for easy cleaning. The provision of shade and shelter are part of managing outdoor housing. Even though horses can adapt to a wide range of environmental conditions, research shows that horses are prone to seek shelter during rainy, windy, or snowy conditions. For this reason, the code requires that horses must have access to shelter that protects them from the harmful effects of extreme weather conditions. Shelter can be in a natural form, such as trees or hedges. It can be constructed of wood or shade cloths, or it can be a structure like a shelter or lean-to, as long as there is enough space in the shelter to accommodate all horses at the same time. Foals, older horses, horses that are injured, sick, or have a low body condition score, horses with a moist or wet coat, and horses that are not acclimated to cold, damp weather are more vulnerable to cold, damp weather and may need extra protection from the conditions. If you choose to use blankets, the condition of the horse beneath the blankets must be examined at least weekly as required by the code, but ideally on a daily basis. When not managed properly, blanketing horses can lead to sores or deteriorating body condition without the caregiver being aware. The blanket should be well fitted and in good repair. It must be appropriate for the weather conditions, and it cannot lead to heat stress. In wet conditions, the blanket should be waterproof and breathable. Horses need to be monitored for heat and cold stress. Shivering is a heat-producing response to cold temperatures and can be an indicator of cold stress. A horse that is unable to move around, whether indoors or outdoors, is most vulnerable, along with thin horses, older horses, or sick horses. A horse experiencing heat stress may appear weak or disoriented. They may have muscle tremors and shallow or rapid breathing. You, as the caregiver, are required to promptly assist any horses that are showing signs of heat or cold stress. We will now move on to fences and gates. Strong, well-maintained fencing and gates are required to ensure horses stay within their intended enclosures. Good fencing and gates will also decrease the risk of injury and increase safety of both animals and people. There are several types of fencing materials that are suitable for horses. This list includes wood, metal pipe, mesh, and electric. Page wire, barbed wire, and narrow gauge high tensile steel wires are used in extensive grazing settings, but should be avoided in closely confined paddocks, as these types of fencing can cause severe injury to horses, especially if not maintained. No matter which type of fencing you choose to use, it must be constructed and maintained to minimize the risk of injury, and must be strong enough to contain the horses. The minimum recommended height for horse fencing is 5 feet, which is higher than other livestock, as horses are more prone to jump fences. Gates should be a minimum of 4 feet wide, and horses, such as stallions, may need added enforcement in order to ensure containment. If you choose to use electric fencing, it must be installed according to the manufacturer's specifications, and all power units for electric fences must be designed to prevent short circuits or stray voltage. Temporary electric fences used for strip grazing or pasture rotation are not an acceptable permanent perimeter fence for horses. To help reduce the risk of injury due to fencing, introduce horses to unfamiliar fenced areas during daylight hours. You may want to mark smooth wire and other hard-to-see fencing in such a way that it is more visible to horses, such as tying yellow tape to the fence line. Horses should also be supervised when they are first introduced to electric fencing, and you should avoid mixing new horses at the same time as the group is first introduced to electric fencing. We are now going to address facilities for special need horses. There are several circumstances where the need for special housing for horses will arise. This can include foaling, stallions, new arrivals, and sick or injured animals. Whether foaling takes place in stalls, paddocks, or pastures, the area should be large enough to accommodate the movements of the mare during foaling and allow her to comfortably lie down on her side during and after delivery. It is also important to ensure the foaling area offers protection from predators. If stalls are used during foaling, they should have solid walls, including the stall door. If foaling takes place in a fenced area, the fencing should be constructed to prevent the mare's legs from becoming entangled when she lies down, and to ensure the foal cannot become entangled either. After foaling, the area should provide ample space for the addition of the foal. If box stalls are used to house the mare and a foal up to 2 months of age, they should be at least 30% larger than the average box stall. Every effort should be made to ensure foals are protected from the weather and are comfortable, as they are sensitive to adverse weather conditions and can lose body heat if they are wet, lying on a cold surface, or are exposed to drafts. Keeping warm requires energy. Letting a newborn foal become chilled is an immense drain on a foal's already modest energy reserves. Weak, premature, or sick foals are even more vulnerable to chilling, and the loss of body heat in these foals can substantially reduce their chances of survival. If there are adverse weather conditions at foaling, or you have a weak, premature, or sick foal, ensure that the foal is dried off promptly, and that there is supplemental shelter and other means of keeping the foal warm, such as extra bedding and a full blanket. Heat lamps or space heaters are sometimes used to warm the stall. However, unless used with caution, such heaters can be a fire hazard and can lead to overheating, particularly if the foal is not able to move away from the heat source. Using a full blanket is often the most practical option and is quite effective. Any foal requiring an additional heat source or blanket should be monitored frequently. During foaling, you should provide a dry, sheltered foaling area. The mare should be moved to this area ahead of time so she can become familiar with it before foaling. If she seems restless, she may need to have a companion horse nearby. Stallions need specialized management and should only be handled and cared for by experienced horse people. While stallions may not be suitable for turnout with other horses, efforts should be made to meet their social needs and provide environmental stimulation. As stated previously, fencing and stall materials for stallions must be safe and strong. Owners must have the ability to segregate sick or injured horses for treatment. When sick pens or stalls are used, they must be equipped with a source of feed and water and be cleaned between uses. Ideally, owners will have sheltered, segregated, and well-bedded sick pens or stalls for horses that are sick, injured, or recovering. For proper management of contagious disease, the sick pens or stalls should be constructed so that contact is not possible between horses in adjoining pens. Sick pens and stalls should be designed in a way that they can be easily cleaned and disinfected. We have now reached the end of Part 1 for Section 2 on facilities. You will now proceed to Part 2, which covers indoor housing and safety and emergencies.